From an architecture point of view, feasibility initially started with what's the right product. We don't rack and pack and stack them. Everything is a completely different set of restrictions. Most importantly, and it can never be questioned in the feasibility, is the livability of the layout that works for the client and the product. They're going to have a great time, they're going to have a great life, it's going to be something great.
Vadim, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Russell. How are you?
Very well, thanks, mate. Before we dive into things, can you start by telling us a bit about yourself, or what do we need to know about your childhood or early life that makes you who you are today?
Oh, okay. So going all the way back to the cradle. Absolutely. So I was actually born in the Ukraine, moved to New Zealand, raised in New Zealand when I was quite young.
New Zealand.
You'll probably hear some of those today. And then I studied in NZ, and then I moved across here in 2009. And I've been a Perth local since then. Met a Perth girl that meant I couldn't move anywhere else. I had to stay in Perth, but I don't regret it at all.
And why Perth?
How to explain? What a town! Like, it's sunsets, coastal.
And had you been here before?
Never. My brother and I both moved here, and he's a doctor, and he worked in Freo Hospital, and I found a job in North Freo. So both decided to support dockers.
God bless you.
Yeah, thank you. And then he just had enough. He left, and
Of the dockers?
No, no, I don't think he'll ever escape them. No, he left WA and left me here, but no regrets. I think this is awesome. I wouldn't live anywhere else in Australia.
So it was a bit of a punt. You sort of came over here on a whim and said, that'll do, throw a dart at the map.
That's it.
And there you go.
Yeah, so, and then moved here. I worked for 5 years effectively as a design architect for a medium, large scale company. Designed probably, 1,000, 2,000 apartments around Perth, and just took a punt. My wife now, she just supported me. She said, just give it a go. My brother said, just give it a go. And I had savings for about 3 months of, thought if nothing works in 3 months, I can always come back and work for someone. So luckily I had a first good break and about a month into it. And it's all just expanded from there effectively.
And did you have to lean on any of your past or previous relationships with that, or was it sort of almost like standing out and stepping out on your own and going, you know what, the shackles are off and it's now time to get some rubber on the road?
Yeah, look, everyone's going to be different. And I'll say this, I had almost zero relationships here. So I didn't go to school here. I didn't go to uni here. I had no family here. Look, I was very, very lucky to work where I did because I learned so much, but equally, we were never that exposed to clients. As you can imagine, a lot of bosses are pretty careful about those relationships. So I was never really exposed. So there was no one really to call and say, hey, I've gone out on my own. Do you want to come across as well or anything like that? We always worked sort of behind the shadows in that sense. So it was tough. Like you literally have to put yourself out there. And the way I sort of explain it is just chase every lead, because one of them will eventually come out, and, cast your net as wide as you can, and something may come out of it. And luckily in the first month or so, something did come out of it. And then, that taught me just cast your net and see what happens. Because any relationship, it could take, they may like you straight away and they'll say, hey, I've actually got an opportunity for you, or they'll just continue to keep track of what you're doing. And then 6 months, 12 months down the line, they're like, okay, cool. I think I'm pretty comfortable with who you are and what you've done now. And, let's give this a go. So
I assume in that sense that the commitment they're making when they engage an individual or an architect is a big commitment. It's and it's not something that they would commit to every day. Like, it's not. I wouldn't imagine it's a weekly. If it's, say, like a private client, they're not going to engage with you weekly or something like that. It's a big commitment for them, big decision to make.
Absolutely. I sort of explained it to my team, and if we break it down to who we are, we're effectively luxury consultants, in the sense that no one can all the time afford a luxury. So just think about that. Someone's willing to pay for your input and your advice and your consultancy. So always remember, it's not everyone can have an architect. There's a reason why they want an architect. Who's your audience? What's the reason? And try to appeal to that.
So just talking about designing for feasibility from day one, feasibility, I guess, in this ever-changing environment where the cost of construction has exploded, everyone's got these, as you said, you pretty much, people trust you with their vision and their dream, and then for you to try and bring that to life. On a fiscal note, is that hard to make someone's dream? We've all got that, I guess, that champagne taste on that beer budget, or is it the shackles are off and there is no feasibility? It's just that's what I want, that's what I'm going to get.
When I sort of started my firm, and obviously not having connections, not having actual clients, one of the simplest ways is actually to find and create your own work. So what I used to do is I used to just search for available land. Then I taught myself how to use feasibility software, and then I did yield studies on that land, did the full due diligence and planning, and found out, what I think could stack up, what could be approved, what could be built, what could be sold. Those are the three sort of key anchor points for any client. And then I would just try to approach a client who's doing something in that similar space and go, hey, I've got this great site. Here's all the numbers. I've done the site layout, done the mud mapping, and I think here's your cash flow, here's your return. So I'd go pretty far down that line. But in terms of the feasibility from an architectural point of view, big is not always better. Is my 2 cents on that. So an apartment may not be the best outcome on a site. It's going to take you longer. Your risk is, much higher exposure. You're limited to who can build it. You have to sell a lot more to make it work. Your finance is a lot harder to make work. So for me, feasibility was trying to be clever. What else can we do? Can we do a terrace house? Can we do a villa? Can we do a combination of an apartment and a villa, or a duplex, a maisonette? So from an architectural point of view, feasibility initially started with what's the right product. And once we get to what's the right product, the next question is, can it get approved? And then the next question, can it be built? So we will always try to engage with local agents. We'll try to engage with builders from a very early point and say, look, if this is the yield we have and the product we have, how do we do it? What's the methodology that you think is currently working in the market? Where the trades are available, where the trades not available? And then we will just try to put all of that IP into a design, and it's almost like a reverse engineered outcome. Most importantly, and it can never be questioned in the feasibility, is the livability of the layout. If the livability of the layout works for the client or the product, they're going to have a great time. They're going to have a great life. It's going to be a sellable product. Where we start getting into the feasibility aspect is, how do we create that floor plan? What methodology, what wall type, what floor type, materiality, aesthetics, everything else starts to become a big picture balance more than anything. So yeah, look, feasibility starts wide and then comes into narrower and narrower detailing.
And would you say, just on that, I'll just touch on what you talked about, the town planning side. If you can just share with us where that town planning, I guess, because that's really, it forms part of your role, but normally there'd be a separate town planner. And I guess, does that come from you just understanding the R codes of each area and suburb and just sort of dealing with that as a part, or is that something you've sort of self-learned? Or
yeah, look, most architects in WA in particular, you're forced into doing a bit of self-learning on that. We're quite a unique place. We've got so many local governments, both metro and regionally. Every local government, obviously, they have to work to WA residential design codes, but at the same time, they have their own local planning schemes, planning strategies, structure plans, red tape, politics internal. So every council has a completely different set of rules and jurisdictions and boundaries that you have to work within, and different personalities as well that you have to manage and maintain. So we have to design to every single local government here. So that does force a designer or an architect to actually understand what your restrictions are before you can work in. So the first things first, if a client comes to me with a site, I say, where is it? So I can understand what my bumper lanes are effectively, and how can we make the most of those bumper lanes. But yeah, not every local government in WA wants more housing and the right type of housing. We're always challenging the status quo in terms of your 3x2 on a quarter acre, and not everyone wants that. So we have to push some boundaries here and there.
And just on that, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking. It was a town. It was an architect in Melbourne, and he was talking about squeezing the lemon, if you will, on particular blocks and getting the town planning on side. But he would always challenge, and this is me paraphrasing, but he would always challenge the town planner at the local council. And what he said was, he had a few people that, as they left, were like, the beautiful thing about you was we actually got to become the town planner who we really wanted to be, because that was real town planning. It wasn't just ticking the R codes or, that doesn't work or it doesn't fit into that mold. It was actually putting something forward that was quite unique, quite different, and getting them to really assess it on from a development and understand, like you said, as far as against the status quo, but they actually enjoyed that part of it. What they didn't like was the vanilla applications come through. They'd actually finally got someone that was willing to put something forward and sort of, I guess, something out of the norm or challenge the area of what they were trying to achieve in that area.
We're actually quite lucky in WA. We do have what's called a DRP, a design review panel, for anything. Look, in most local governments, if you're doing over 4 units, you'll more than likely be recommended to go to a DRP. A DRP is basically a stage that you have to go through before even submitting the DA. It's a panel of architects, designers, urban designers, landscape architects, and other specialist consultants. And they basically tear your scheme apart. That's their whole job. They're paid by the council to not just look at the planning guidelines, but to go, well, have you considered this, and this? I find that really helpful, because a lot of the time we can't necessarily convince the planner that what we're doing is actually going to be a better outcome. A lot of the time I say the R codes is a C+ outcome if you follow the R codes. But the design review panel, as an advisory body to most local governments, can say, actually, you know what, this applicant's actually got a point. Here's why this may be a better outcome than what we have on paper. So I do find a lot of value in that, and I have seen a lot of local government planners and private planners get a lot out of that as well from an urban design outcome. So I think we're pretty lucky to have that. Again, sometimes it depends on the personalities on that design review panel as well.
Does that vary from council to council?
Yeah, it does. Every local government has their own design review panel with different people. There's a lot of people that sit on a lot of design review panels around Perth, and sometimes you have an odd one that you haven't seen somewhere else. And yeah, everyone has different opinions. So you have to take everyone on the journey from the start, why you did it, what's the reasoning for it. The design review panel gets a lot of we get a lot of out of it, and so do the planners actually assessing it. They get a lot out of it as well. So I think we are lucky to have that. Sometimes I don't like going to design review panels because, as a designer, it's you may have followed the client's brief exactly and got them the best outcome, the most feasible outcome, one that you're happy with for a number of reasons, and then you're being told no because I like this, and that's tough because it's your heart as well as a creative. And sometimes we get into arguments. I won't lie. Sometimes we get we're told you need to do more here, and I literally will have arguments saying yes, but you realise that's an extra $8,000 per townhouse. Add that up across 30 townhouses. You're asking a lot of the scheme with one simple request, and it is important to outline the feasibility aspects of that.
And from a client point of view as well, I'd imagine that they're working to a yield where they go, well, on this site, Vadim, we need to meet budget or to make this work or stack, we need a certain outcome, and that's that return on investment, for the yield of that block of land needs to be circa 40, 50 apartments or whatever that may look like. And then I need to tell, from a planning point of view, come back and say, well, we think you only need 10 there. And all of a sudden it's like, well, I've just paid $3 million for the land, and now you want me to put 4 houses on there. It's just like, that's probably not going to work.
Yeah, okay, so it's called due diligence. Look, a lot of the time a client will just send us an email and I'm looking at the site. What do you think is viable and possible? And it'll take me 4 hours to go through planning, map it out, and understand what I think comfortably I can get out of it. Obviously, it's a risk regardless, because planning is not a straight process.
So right-sized growth, what does it mean to scale the studio? running a studio like PROEKT comes with a lot of choices. How have you thought about growth over the years? Has that changed as you've gone in your journey from say day dot when you sort of had 3 months income up your sleeve, or?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, you and I we're sort of in a consultancy business model, right? So we don't rack and pack and stack them. Everything is a completely different set of restrictions. Everything's a different brief. You have to consistently come up with a different outcome for every project that you do. There's no such thing as copy paste, regardless.
Despite popular belief.
Yes, correct.
Don't you just cut and paste it and stack the floors?
Yeah,
away you go.
And we don't have CAD monkeys either. So, I came to a resolution a few years ago when I did scale, because the more bigger projects you come on, you go, oh, I need help. And then we got to a point, I remember, I think we were about 10 people, and we weren't more profitable. It was actually more work for me to manage people, and sort of drip feed and think ahead, and sometimes even do other people's work that you've hired them for. And I just came back to the fact that, we're consultants and a client pays us to be able to provide them unique, specific brief outcomes. And that requires one-on-one relationships. And that requires being across your project. So for me, the most reasonable outcome from the sleepless nights of I don't feel I'm in control of my projects, I don't feel like I know what's going on, is to actually scale back. And as soon as you scale back and bring on a manageable amount of workload, you're more across your projects. You can provide that level of service that a client will expect from a consultant. You're able to answer questions quickly, directly, and with a history behind it. That made life and business a lot better because it's ultimately what I started out to try to do, to provide that level of service. Obviously, that comes with challenges. So with a smaller business, you need to have enough projects to make sure when you finish one of these small projects, you have another one to get onto. So there is a lot of loading and resourcing to make sure that you can provide the level of service and then not sit on your hands. So it comes with different challenges. But one thing that I like is knowing that any of my clients right now can call me and I'll be able to tell them where their project is at, what are the challenges on that project, what are the wins on that project, and when will it be finished? So yeah, for me, bigger wasn't better. Same thing as feasibility. Bigger is not always better. And I just remember that, we're there to be able to answer a phone call and say, that question you have for me, here's your answer. And I found a large scale business wasn't able to provide that level of service that I was after. And I'm getting a lot more sleep now.
Beautiful. And did it take long in that, when you went out on your own to then finally get, and I'm assuming there was different, there's always different challenges and growth as challenges morph as growth does as well, in putting that first employee on. And if you're anything like me, to share my experience, was just like I was going out there, winning work, then having to come back, deliver the work, or execute the work, deliver the work, and then look back down and go, oh, that's right, I've got to get back out there. And it's that whole, and then you think to yourself, well, why I'm out there chasing work's not getting done. And then it's like, well, so I need someone else to be here doing that. And I've got to be out there greasing the wheels.
So
and
the first person that I brought on, I sort of needed to first work out what my processes are. So what can I automate outside of what you're doing, to bring in work, to have the workshops? What are the things that you can delegate? So what's your processes? And then, so my first employee was the outcome of what can I delegate and what can't I delegate? And once you're starting find some efficiencies in that delegation, two things that can happen. That person will go, hey, I like what you're doing. I want to step more into that role, and they start learning more and more about your entirety of your process, not just what they've been delegated to. And then they're able to step into that role. Or, and unfortunately, that's not for everyone. A lot of the time people, and fairly so, they just want a 9 to 5 and they want to have paycheck and just go home. Nothing wrong with that. A lot of the time they'll stay in that role. And then you go, all right, well, then now you're more efficient in that role. Now that means I can bring on more work But now if I'm bringing in more work, where's my missing gap now that I need to delegate the next stage of? So it's sort of like an ever evolving, opening door process. Oh, where's my gaps now? And how do I fill that gap based on how effective we are now? Yeah, constantly changing.
And it's hard, and it is hard. You've got a level of expectation, and as you said, you drip feed that new person that comes on, and you probably spend more time, taking more time out of your space, delegating and teaching them how to do all that stuff that you want. But yeah, I love that when they can slowly and gradually take on more, and you're sort of like, oh, I didn't realize you could do. Oh yeah, and then you sort of. Yeah, and you can slowly, as hard as it is for an owner operator, is handing over those reins and trusting someone else with that work who, regardless of what anyone says, they're not going to do it to anywhere near as good as you. That's fact.
Yeah, but we just got to remember at some point someone gave us that opportunity as well.
That's right.
So you got to test everyone. Some will fly, some will sink. But until you give them a go,
sink or swim in the deep end.
Yeah.
All right. For other business owners out there in the design and construction space, what advice would you give around finding the sweet spot between scale and control? And just to double back on that, for you, the sweet spot. So you went up to the 10 employees and the revenue of whatever that was, and then now you've sort of come back down and gone, let's just wind that back and let's be.
And look, I'll probably add to that. So it really depends about the kind of work you're doing as well. Large scale, small scale, intricate, simple. A house can be very simple. It can be
on face value.
Yeah, it can be reproduced. But if you're doing a lot of, medical facilities, if you're doing a lot of childcare, completely different requirements, a completely different level of skill set.
What do you mean you don't just cut and paste? A childcare, it's a big house. It's just a bigger house.
Absolutely. Nothing that children need that we don't. So, yeah, look, it depends on the scale. For me, I've found we're pretty broad. So we do everything from renovations to 100 plus apartments, childcare, industrial, aged care. I found the sweet spot for us is about six people. I reckon maximum 8. I've heard a lot of people say they're most profitable around the 4 to 6 mark, and then they're not that profitable to 20, and then they become profitable again. However, there's so many outliers in that. There's people that find process and they work with 12 people, or the type of project they do, they just rack and pack them and sack them, those kind of projects. So look, it really depends, but I guess my only advice is find out that breaking point where you feel you're no longer in control. And then is that a case of staff, or is that a case of projects, or is that a case of clients? But there's no magic number, I guess.
It's like walking out to fine line. And I remember my old boss, God bless him, his favourite terminology, he was a bit loose, if you will. His favourite terminology was, maximum growth occurs on the border of chaos and order. So, when there's too much chaos, you'd seek order, and when there's too much order, you'd seek chaos. But he said, if you can get that sweet spot between chaos and order, too much order, it's going to be too slow. Too much chaos, it's too manic, because that's where the maximum growth. And his mantra was to live on that, which was
chaotic most of the time.
It was at the best of times. I was like, we can't do it. Just have a go. We'll be right. We'll work it out. Just submit it, and we'll work it out. We'll fake it till we make it.
It's a little bit of an expansion to pressure makes diamonds, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
We gotta challenge ourselves every day. Otherwise, we'll just become stagnant. And then how do we grow?
That's exactly right. Now we'll just lean into housing in WA for a minute, because it's a red hot topic, and being involved in real estate, and I love real estate in Perth, and I sort of can't believe the prices, and I've walked away from plenty of recent purchases that just, for me, they're just the cost of, and I know that sort of the cost of construction. And for me, from looking from the outside in, the cost of real estate in Perth has exploded so much in the last 4 or 5 years, which is pretty similar to everywhere. But I think Perth seems to have had a little bit more legs in that market. Have you found that changing, in the housing stock, where people are trying to get more on, or trying to build more for less, and what's, I guess, for the density side of things, where everyone's, as we talked about earlier, the density, everyone's looking for, to condense it, not sprawl from Mandurah to Alkimos. And then you've got these empty train lines running up and down, but that, that more that urban sprawl. How do we get that, that, I guess, that condensed urban growth inside and internally? Is that something you're noticing, or is that something you're...
So I was born into an apartment, right? So we had my parents, my brother, and a dog in a 2-bedroom apartment.
Ukraine, New Zealand.
In Ukraine, and a little bit in New Zealand, to be honest.
I don't think me and you together would be able to afford it. Maybe you, but not us together would be able to afford an apartment in New Zealand at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Is that as expensive as what they tell us?
Unbelievably, yeah. But that's a different topic. And then here, look, I've probably spent 14 years living in apartments here. And it's been great because I can actually design apartments, understanding the value of a square meter and the value of storage or a little bit of privacy between a bathroom and a dining area. Here, I've always said I feel like Perth is allergic to apartments. It's been a hard process to get people onto apartments. Terrace houses, townhouses have been much, much simpler in the last few years. And I'll come back to why I think that's the case. But for me, yes, we talk about sprawl. Sprawl in WA is horrendous. But what I feel doesn't make an apartment work is a lack of amenity. So you can make an apartment work wherever you want as long as there is amenity there. If you have the river, if you have the ocean, if you have shops, if you have shopping centres, if you have libraries, if you have parks, an apartment is most likely going to work if those things are in a walkable environment. But we're not creating walkable neighbourhoods in WA. So where apartments do work is western suburbs. There's a reason for that. Your river, you're the sea, your public transport, your shopping centres, good cafes, restaurants. But equally, you're actually finding apartments work quite far south or quite far north, like the project you and I are working on, where we can provide apartments and we can condense 45 apartments into a reasonably good scale site, but every single apartment gets an ocean view and a sunset. That's amenity. If we can provide amenity, most people will actually consider apartments. In terms of terrace houses and townhouses, I feel like it's a bit of a medium ground for a lot of people because you just want to say, I've got a backyard. I don't know what it is about WA, but just the ability to say, I've got a backyard. It changes everything. But with a terrace house, it's effectively a vertical apartment. It's the same footprint, slightly bigger.
More stairs.
Some stairs, yeah. But it's a lock up and leave lifestyle. But the ability to have your backyard there and a place to put your cars and a garage, I think we just have to detrain.
A Hills hoist out the back and a holding out the front.
Yeah, we will detrain from those memories of how it used to be here.
And do you think that's slowly changing?
Absolutely. People are starting to take up more and more of a lock up and leave lifestyle or a simple lifestyle. I won't lie to you, I hated doing the lawns and the verge every other weekend. It just took up so much of your time. Like you probably work, I don't know, 60, 70-hour weeks. Then
depends
on
who you ask.
Yeah. And you come home, you just want to spend time with your family, or you want to go for a coffee.
And it's the uptake. I've got 4 children at home, and you could almost argue that I'm the 5th. But it is like having that backyard is great, and having that front yard is great. But there's only one person that looks after it, and I've only just now into where the business is at the moment. Now handing over what I would call my holy grail of mowing the lawn. The reality is that it's just the time. It's just like, do I have the time for the backyard? And there's so many, like the kids, even now, like they can do swimming lessons at the pool, and that's the backyard. I think that's not the dying trend, but I think it's slowly changing. And I think the price increase and everything like that is I think that'll shape Perth into. But do you find the density when we talk density and councils? Do you find is it a height thing that everyone sort of no one wants a high rise, like no one wants the Gold Coast sort of appeal, like it's I know that through through Cottesloe and the Grove might be an exception to the rule with the height sort of thing, but most of them freak out at the height.
Look, I think to be honest, a lot of that starts with connotation of an apartment. If you open up the Post, apartment's never referred to as an apartment; it's referred to as a flat. Like it starts there, and then
a crack flat.
Yeah, is it? No, it's actually a nice home for someone facing the ocean on a park. It's the ability to have population density to fulfill cafes needing to have population to operate their business. We forget about that. Towers don't always work as well. We've only got a few builders left in WA that can actually do a tower as well, or just do one. It's dire times out there at the moment. But, 4-story, 5-story, there's a place for it. Look at Europe. That's the streetscape. 4 or 5 story streetscapes, walking neighbourhood.
I think Sydney's very similar. Like you see those old Art Deco sort of apartments. They're sort of, 4 stories, and
it's a vibrant environment, vibrant neighbourhood.
Yeah, no one's got a carpet space, but don't need one with all the infrastructure.
The traffic's horrendous. Why would you?
Yeah, I know. And to finish off, if you had a blank canvas, how would you reshape part of Perth with a better medium density design? So, I guess from that, like if the shackles were off, what would your solution to be for the medium density design? You can build whatever you want, wherever you want. What do you think the happy medium is? And because obviously you still live in an apartment?
Yeah, we're in an apartment right now. Disclaimer: I did buy a piece of land, but it's only 200 square meters, and we can get a lot of home out of that. And I'm pretty happy with that. And it's got no lawn, just native gardens.
And they tell me the air is free to a certain extent as you go up. That sort of you pay for the land, but
to be honest, if I actually had to state what I think is working really well, I'll give kudos to a lot of the Development WA projects that have been rolled out. For example, Shoreline and North Coogee in that area. It's really tight lots. They're 6 meters wide, 20 meters deep potentially, and they encourage verticality. So 2 stories and 3 stories and so forth. But
almost like a newer version of Supercentro.
Yeah, but even more condensed. But if you look where it's placed, where it's located, and how it's been master planned, you still get your garage, you still get a bit of lawn, but you look out onto a public open space, a park, a playground, where you can actually sit in your front yard and watch your kids play in the playground and make friends with the neighbours. It's located next to Frio. It's located next to the beach. It's amenity, and I think it works. I think it's a good model. We put an offer on a place down there, but didn't get it. But
in Coogee,
yeah. It'll be a long travel, but I wouldn't mind it. I think they've done a good job, and I think if we can do more of that sort of 6 meter wide frontages, I think there's a place for it in WA. It's, in my opinion, the missing middle in terms of having all the things that your parents and your grandparents had, but at the same time more condensed, more buildable, using less floor area, getting more people per square meter to allow businesses and food and beverage to operate and survive and walk to a park, walk to the beach. I think it's great. We need to do more of that in the right locations as a start.
And without getting you to weigh in on it, but I was thinking that would have been something great. Like that would have been perfect for Leighton, down at Leighton Beach there. And I think those apartments, they've been up for probably 10 or 15 years now. And just, when those apartments initially went up, there just wasn't a lot there. It was just like it was on the other side of the railway tracks. It was sort of, you obviously had North Freo train station there, but, there's a couple of cafes down there. But I would have thought that would have been a prime, that land all through there, all that sort of wasted land, if you will, that just sits there.
Well, there'll be a ton of it just south of it, probably in the next 20 years. And I think from what I've seen, that sort of North Coogee model, South Free model is going to be quite widely taken up, and for the right reasons.
And I was talking to someone the other day. It was we were doing a job for them, and they actually said they worked for the Freo Port. And I said, "What's happening at the Freo Port?" We were talking about the grand plan of potentially relocating that eventually down south of near Coburn. Something like that. It was a master plan. 20 years in the making.
That's the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
But it was almost like if that moves down there, do you know what I mean? What does that? Where does that leave Fremantle? And what does that? Maybe I don't know. Maybe they still use the port at some point. But
yeah, we've got to get those cruise ships in somehow.
The COVID ships.
Don't back it till you try. Look, I think that place, like I said, looking at the master plan and everything the state government's released, I think they are leaning into that sort of North Coogee model, that Development WA model. I think perfect. It's still walkable to Leighton, still walkable to Fremantle. Looks like there's going to be some bridges across potentially, which would be nice. It's house and land. That's the one thing. It's like gold in WA, house and land.
And I stayed. I don't stay very often at the Rendezvous. And I looked out. No, this must have been 2 or 3 years ago, I suppose. And I looked out and I thought Perth is massively underdeveloped.
Yeah.
like everything's 1 or 2 stories all through that Scarborough, and it sort of goes back up that hill up to W. Nothing, and when it's not when you actually stand back or catch go on a helicopter on your way home, Vadim, you actually appreciate that. You just look at it and you go, fuck, like far out, like it is. It is. We are massively underdeveloped. And I know there's some old councils in certain areas that are anti, condensed living and all the rest of it. But I think you look at it compared to most other places, mainly East Coast, of course. But I think when I look at that, I go far out. Like there is so much more we could be doing in condensing it rather than spending money on train tracks out to Alkmaar.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, and overall, like we've got a lot of challenges here. We've got a lot of opinions. We've got a lot of local governments. We've got a lot of different planning schemes, and we just need to unlock inner city larger lots. We need to unlock it for more density and clever density. So not just height, but plot ratio and setbacks. Look, medium density codes that came through last year do go some way to helping that. Probably, in my opinion, not far enough, especially if you consider the first draft that came out.
And do you think that's them testing the water to see how far they can push that envelope, to see how much backlash, or they go, well, let's just we'll just chip all that out and see how they see what the feedback is from that.
Yeah, it was a balancing act between doing that and also not upsetting the volume builders as well. So there's actually a few really cool tweaks in the medium density codes, which I'm surprised no one's looking into, which is in particular livable housing gold level dwellings, which give you a massive dispensation on lot area, and so do small dwellings. But I don't see a lot of people taking that up, which is strange. There's some really clever planners that are starting to do it now, but it's rare. Like there's lots which were never subdividable before can now be subdividable in those key areas if you put a livable housing outcome there, or if you put a small dwelling there. And people get a bit nervous. What does that mean? But a livable housing outcome is basically aging in place. It's slightly larger hallways, slightly larger bathroom, slightly larger bedroom on the ground floor. You can still go 2 stories, nothing wrong with that. Or small dwellings, you're limiting yourself to 70 square meters, but people forget that's the equivalent of a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. Now, if I can get 160 square meters, 169 square meters or whatever is the minimum in Cottesloe and build a 2-bed, 2-bath, I'd be pretty happy. I can walk to the beach and to the train. Unfortunately, it's also hard to justify to a lender that you're going to build a 2-bedroom house. There's going to have to be some changes, but I think
there is a square meter with each bank, whatever that looks like. That's 69 meters, or that they won't touch, or they won't finance anything below.
Oh, you're talking about apartments wise. So yes, anything under 50 square meters starts to become quite difficult in WA. Even though we do have the ability to have studios at 38 square meters, but
I suppose that's just a bank risk profile that their approaches. It obviously hasn't worked in the past.
So many layers.
But no, thanks so much for joining us on the show today, Vadim. It's much appreciated, and thanks for coming in and taking the time out of your day.
Thank you for having us.
And we'll get you back on in due course and share the highlights of the rest of the year.
Thank you very much for having us here.